The old way. The old way was about your child's character. It was about teaching your child within what I call the classroom of the family to have respect for other people, beginning with you, his parents. You transferred that respect to other adults. And then as you grew up, you were taught to transfer that respect to everybody, your peers, people that you just came into casual contact with in the world. You were taught within your family to be a responsible, contributing human being. And you were taught that by being given a contributory role within your family that taught you what citizenship was all about, that it wasn't about getting, it was about giving. And you were taught to be resourceful, to hang in there and tough it out in the face of challenge. It was about character. And today it's about your self-esteem. High self-esteem. Now let me ask you something. I'm going to do a little thought exercise with you, and I want you to answer me honestly. If I had been able to poll each and every one of you as you came through the door, and all I said was, true or false, it's good for a child to have high self-esteem, how many of you would have said at the door, true? Raise your hands, please. Now let me ask you a question. See, here's what's happened in America. You folks have heard this. You have heard this, and you have heard it so many times. This idea has become embedded in our culture. It is good for people to have high self-esteem. And the earlier it starts, the better. So it's good for children to have high self-esteem. So you've heard that. But you see, one of the problems in America is we're not asking the people who spread this propaganda questions like, how did you determine this? How do you know this? Where is the evidence of this? We're not asking those questions. We've just heard this so much that we believe it. It's brainwashing, in effect. It's a form of brainwashing. Now, let me talk to your common sense, because your common sense knows the truth. And if I can wake your common sense up, which I hope I'm going to do in just a moment, your common sense will tell you that you should not have raised your hand a moment ago. Raise your hand if you would rather be married to a person with high self-esteem as opposed to a person who is humble and modest. See, I'm talking to your common sense now. Raise your hand if you would rather be employed by a person with high self-esteem as opposed to a person who is humble and modest. Raise your hand if you would rather have an employee with high self-esteem versus an employee who is humble and modest. Raise your hand if you would rather that your pastor have high self-esteem or be humble and modest. Raise your hand if you would rather have a close friend with high self-esteem or a close friend who is humble and modest. See, now I've spoken to your common sense. And now many of you are struggling to reconcile what your common sense just told you with the propaganda that you have digested. And so people come up to me and they say, well, John, I want my child to be confident. And I go, where is the evidence that people who are humble and modest are not confident? You know, a culture is not built on the shoulders of people with high self-esteem. A culture is built on the shoulders of people with respect for others. That's the glue that holds culture together. We never ask the right questions. There is a researcher at Florida State University. His name is Roy Baumeister, and I'm not going to get real academic on you tonight. But Baumeister has been asking the questions that we should have asked at the beginning. He has been asking, how do people with high self-esteem behave? See, here's what we were sold. We were sold people with high self-esteem feel good about themselves. That was the mantra. People with high self-esteem feel good about themselves. Well, that's true. Baumeister has determined that is true. But the follow-up question is, so what? Now, Baumeister has found that people with high self-esteem have very little respect for other people. Very little consideration for you. Because basically it's all about them. It's not about you. You're a pawn in their game. You're someone to be manipulated. And your common sense told you this. You don't want to be married to a person with high self-esteem. You don't want to be a pawn in that person's game. You don't want to be employed by a person with high self-esteem. Your common sense knows the truth. Baumeister administered a self-esteem questionnaire to various populations of people around the country, groups of people. The highest scores were obtained by people incarcerated in maximum security prisons. Isn't that chilling? Every teacher in America this year will go to an anti-bullying seminar because bullying has become ubiquitous in the American school. And Baumeister says we have done an eminently good job in the home and in the American public school especially of instilling high self-esteem into America's children. People with high self-esteem don't have good manners because manners are a demonstration of respect for other people. A person with good manners is paying attention to other people. A person with high self-esteem wants people to pay attention to him. See, in America, it used to be about your manners. And today it's about the child's skills. I went to first grade not knowing my ABCs. This is unheard of today. I went to first grade not knowing my ABCs. You ask people my age, when did you learn your ABCs? Most people my age will say, first grade. Because if you went to kindergarten back then, if kindergarten was part of your school system, and kindergarten was hardly universal back in the 1950s, but if you went to kindergarten back then, kindergarten was just, it was learning how to be a pro-social human being. That's all it was about. It was just it was a child's first introduction to a group experience. Most kids back then, most kids, not all, but most, the only group learning experience they'd had before kindergarten, if they went to kindergarten, was Sunday school. So kindergarten was non-academic. I went to first grade not knowing my ABCs. I sat in a first grade classroom with 49 other children. Now there are no names under the picture, so all I know is 50 kids showed up the day the picture was taken. I don't know, there might have been a flu epidemic. There might have been 65 kids in my first grade class, I don't know. There was only one teacher. See, one teacher can teach 50 children who don't have high self-esteem. You weren't allowed to have high self-esteem back then. If I'd have come to first grade with high self-esteem, my teacher would have set about to lower it. With my mother's permission and full cooperation. Your mother, my mother used to say things to me like, John Rosemond, you are acting too big for your britches. Now you had better size yourself to those britches real quick or I'll size them to you. What's it going to be? Or you were up on your high horse and you better get down right now and park that horse. And your mother used to say things to you, and see, all these things kept you grounded. They kept you grounded. Your mother used to tell you, I can almost hear the words, John Rosemond, you let me tell you something. I don't care how important a position you ever occupy in life. You keep one thing in mind, you're nothing but a small fish in a big pond. And those things, they keep you grounded. You know, I think today's parents think their children are the only fish in the pond, worth mentioning. So I think you grow up more comfortable in your own skin if you don't have high self-esteem. You know. And the opposite of high self-esteem is not low self-esteem. The opposite of high self-esteem is respect for others. And manners are a demonstration of that. They're a way of exercising and keeping yourself reminded that it's about other people. And today it's all about skills. It's all about growing a 3-year-old who can recognize all 50 state license plates, and a child who can tell you all 50 state capitals by the age of 4, and goes to first grade reading at a 3rd grade level. And, you know, what it really all boils down to is getting that bumper sticker. Well, it does, doesn't it? That's what it's all about in America today, getting that bumper sticker. I come out of Point of Grace Church in Des Moines, Iowa a couple of years ago. I just spoken there on a Sunday morning. And I'm usually the last person, or one of the last, out of the building, wherever I speak. And so I come out of Point of Grace, and I'm walking across this wind-swept parking lot in February in Des Moines, Iowa, West Des Moines, to my car. And I hear my name called, and I turn, and there's a fellow, and I can tell immediately he's, you know, about my age, and he's walking toward me, and we start talking, and, you know, he walks up and he says, John, while you were talking, it just brought back so many memories of my own childhood. And John, you and I must have been raised in the same house. What bedroom did you sleep in? I can't remember, you know. And we started talking about the way it was, you know, and what wonderful childhoods we had. We who had chores, and there were no excuses if we misbehaved, and yet we were happier kids. Now, we were happier, I think, in large part because our mothers and fathers weren't involved. It's got to be oppressive for a child to have his parents involved with him. But you know, children 5 or 6 years old whose parents are involved, they have nothing to compare it with. They don't know that this is a state of oppression, you know. Anyway, so we were talking, this fellow whom I'll call Bill and me, and we were standing at the end of a minivan, and it was sort of blocking the wind, and the bumper sticker was on the rear window right here. And I tapped it, and I said, Bill, here's a sign of the times. Can you imagine your mother driving around town with this thing on her car? And he got this startled expression on his face. He said, I would have never asked myself that question. He said, John, you know the answer as well as I do. Our mothers wouldn't have been caught dead driving around town with that thing on their cars. That's right. Wouldn't have been caught dead driving around town with that bumper sticker on their cars. I'm almost tempted to ask, how many of you have got that bumper sticker on your car? I can almost see by the expressions on some people's faces who's got that bumper sticker on their car, you know? Why wouldn't your mother have been caught dead driving around town? Well, for 2 reasons. Number one, Women did not believe that the measure of a mother was taken by her child's accomplishments. And this is a trap that today's women have walked into. And this is where the competitiveness lies today between women. You know, my mother, I don't think she ever gave a thought to my IQ. But if she had been able to find out, and let's say she'd found out that John had a high IQ, she wouldn't have gone around town telling people, my child is gifted. These are the kinds of things that today's mothers tell people. My child is gifted. That's an odd thing to say. Who really cares? You know, I know plenty of people who were smart, who've grown up and trashed their lives. You know, IQ is not the making of a person. Your character is the making of the person, not your IQ. Why do we say these things? Because the measure of a mother in the year 2007 is her child's accomplishments. And this is a trap. And the second reason that your mother wouldn't have been caught dead driving around town with this thing on her car is because it's rude. It's rude, it's disrespectful, it's inconsiderate. There's just no excuse for it. To drive around town with a sign on your car saying you have something other people don't have. You've never thought of it that way, have you? You know, ladies, would you drive around town with a bumper sticker on your car that said, my husband earns 6 figures, does yours? You know, if your husband came home from work one day and he said, babes, guess what? I got a raise today. I'm making 6 figures. And look, they gave me a bumper sticker. You can put it on your car and let everybody know that I'm making 6 figures. You know, you women would look at your husbands, you'd be appalled. You'd say, what, does making 6 figures drive you nuts? I'm not going to put that on my car. But your child comes home with, or the school sends home, the exact same bumper sticker, and you slap it on your car. And I think that this is because today's mothers see their children with tunnel vision. You know, at the end of the tunnel is the child. He occupies the whole visual field. It's all about the child. And see, my mother, and people of my generation can tell you, it wasn't just my mother, I guarantee. I use her as, you know, my example a lot because she's my frame of reference. But, you know, my mother was able to put me in a broad social perspective. And she was able to see me as just a small fish in a big pond. It wasn't about how smart I was. It was about doing my best. See, today's mother isn't satisfied unless her child is making A's. My mother would have been satisfied with C's if teachers had said to my mother, John is, you know, he's no great shakes in the intellect department. He's capable of making C's. My mother would have, okay, fine. There's a place in the world for C students. You know, it's not about, my mother would have, what difference does it make what his IQ is, what his grades in school are? You know, it's up to him to make something of his life. It's up to him to turn this potential into something that will be of contribution to others. You know, my parents used to tell me, it doesn't matter what you do when you grow up as long as you're doing things that are of service to other people. This isn't consistent with driving around town with a bumper sticker on your car that says, my child's in the gifted and talented program. My child's an honor student. Where is the bumper sticker that says, my child has good manners? If I walk into a restaurant with my child, you have nothing to worry about. We're not teaching children in America any longer that contribution is about opening doors for the elderly, that it's about waiting for people to exit elevators before you get in. It's about saying thank you for even small things that people do. Just considerations, not even material things, just considerations. It's about saying excuse me, even though it might have been the other person's role to say excuse me. That's what contribution is all about, because that's about respect for other people, and a culture, I can't say it loudly enough, is built on the shoulders of people who have respect for others, not on the shoulders of people with high self-esteem. You can't build culture on the shoulders of people who think it's all about them.